Hello everyone, and welcome back to Soft Stories. I'm Stratton, and today we are continuing our reading of Silas Hocking's Real Grit, which I have with me here. When last we left off in this story, young Jack Formby had just expressed his affection to Miss Ada Woodville, and like so many young men and women who have made such a proclamation, he has been rebuffed. What effect this shall have on his development as a young man, I guess we'll have to see. So let's continue with Chapter 8 of Real Grit. In the Fernery. Meanwhile, Ada was enduring the pitiless banter of her cousin Kate, who had burst into the room like a small tempest, and began talking and pulling off her gloves at the same time. "So he has proposed, and you have rejected him," she said, whirling about the room, heedless of Ada's pitiful face. "Oh, you cruel little darling. How could you have dared to do such a thing? And he's such a good chance, too, a chance in a lifetime, one might say, and the like of which you are never likely to have again. Do tell me how he looked when you declined the honour." "Who said I had declined the honour?" said Ada with flashing eyes. "Have you been listening at the door?" At which Kate burst into quite a loud peal of laughter. "Oh, you sweet, innocent darling," she said. "What a naive confession, and so it is quite true, isn't it? Of course you told him that your views of life were of such a lofty and heroic order, that you could not condescend to link your life to such a prosaic, commonplace, and useless individual." "No, I did not tell him anything of the sort," Ada replied hotly, "and I think it is unkind of you to speak in the way you do." "Oh, I cannot help it, darling, and you should not be offended. But you see, I met him in the hall, and he had such an awfully woebegone appearance that I could not help putting two and two together, and reading you a little lecture as well on your cruelty." "I think it is that you are cruel," Ada retorted, "and I really do not see what right you have to put two and two together in any such a way." "But how could I help it?" said Kate, still laughing. "He nearly stumbled over me in the hall, and I am quite sure he did not see me. And when I said, 'Good afternoon, Mr. Formby,' he neither heard nor answered, but just walked straight on, as a somnambulist might have done. I really felt sorry for the poor fellow, and I'm sure he is quite heartbroken." "In which case, you will have an opportunity of binding it up for him," Ada answered, and without waiting for a reply, swept out of the room. For the rest of the day, she steadfastly refused to see anyone except her own maid, and excused herself from going down to dinner on the plea that she had a bad headache, and was anxious to be quiet and alone, all of which was quite true. Kate heard the excuse with a curl of the lip, and quietly remarked, "It's much more likely she has a heartache." In truth, she had both, but she kept her heart troubles to herself, and nursed her grief in secret. An awakening was coming to her, if it had not already come. She discovered that the liking she had always felt for Jack Formby had drawn perilously near to love. He was more to her than any other friend she had, aye, and better and nobler than all the others, now that she had been able to see beneath the hard crust of his outer self. His afternoon's talk was more a confession of love. It was also a revelation of himself. He had discovered to her possibilities of greatness and strength that she had hardly dreamed that he possessed. She had always liked him, but never admired him, so she had said to herself 100 times over. But now, all unconsciously, the warp of liking was being crossed by the weft of admiration, and love, or something very near akin to it, was being woven by the process. How could she help regretting, under the circumstances, that she had been so hasty in her judgment, and so ready to fall into the trap that Kate had laid for her? If she had only kept her own counsel, and suspended her judgment until she knew Jack better, both of them might have been happier than they were at present. He had gone away without a word of hope, and she was left in doubt and pain, and she knew enough of him now to know that he would bear his disappointment in silence, and in all probability would never speak to her of love again. Perhaps it was better so. Perhaps it was well that they should be only friends. She thought so once, but she was not certain of it now, and the more she debated the question, the more perplexing it became, and the worse her headache grew, until at length, in utter weariness of mind and body, she stole quietly into bed and tried to forget her heartache in sleep. During the next few weeks, Ada was left in peace. Kate began to see that there was danger lest she should carry her banter too far, and so thwart the very object she had in view. Moreover, her brother Dick would celebrate his 25th birthday early in April, and rejoice at the same time in the full possession of a fortune left him by an old uncle. Consequently, his 25th birthday was to be celebrated with great pomp, and Kate had her hands full in preparing for the same. With the advancing spring, Ada's strength perceptibly increased, and by the end of March she was able to get out into the lanes and fields again. No prisoner ever hailed his liberty with more delight than Ada hailed those bright, sunny days. She felt, she said, like a bird let out of a cage, and went rambling hither and thither in sheer gladness and delight. If there was a shadow at all upon her life, it was to be found in the fact that Jack Formby was not exactly what he used to be. It was only now and then that she met him, and he never offered to accompany her on her rambles. And yet he was as pleasant and genial and generous as he had ever been, if their paths should happen to lie in the same direction. It was when they happened to meet, and he did not offer to turn back or go a step out of his way, that she felt the change. Had she known him less well, she might be inclined to think that he never really cared much for her. But he had shown his heart too truly for her to doubt him. Hence his silence and self-repression but tended to increase her admiration of him, and to deepen her regard. One thing she regretted still, and would never cease to regret while the cause remained, and that was that his life seemed as useless and purposeless as ever. While his father was wearying his brain in the great city of Bodelford from morning till night, and taxing his strength to the utmost limit of endurance, Jack simply did nothing, and to all appearances cared for nothing. No lofty ambition stirred his heart or fired his imagination. He loitered lazily through life, undisturbed by the commercial depression, or by the political activity and excitement. Dick Netherby was in the thick of the political fight, and Ralph Formby to the forefront of nearly every social and philanthropic movement. But Jack, with abilities as she believed greater than either, was just allowing his talents to run to rust, and might as well be out of the world as in it. For any good he had done, or was likely to do. Could she help him? That was a question that had perplexed her greatly. He had told her that he was not worthy of her, but if she would give him hope, he would try to make himself worthy. Ought she not, then, to have given him that word of hope that he desired? So she puzzled herself from day to day, and so, almost unconsciously, she gave Jack the largest place in her thoughts, and, as the inevitable consequence, her strong affection for him gradually deepened into love. Dick's birthday party was a great success. Nearly every family in the neighbourhood was represented, besides which there was a large sprinkling from Bodelford. Jack Formby appeared in the best of spirits, and danced, Kate declared, with every eligible young lady present, with one notable exception, and that Ada Woodville. Jack had not intended this as a slight. On the contrary, he thought he would be consulting her wishes in doing so, and had no idea that she would feel hurt at his apparent neglect. She was too proud, however, to betray her feelings by either word or look, and during the whole of the evening appeared to be in unusually good spirits. Kate was quick to notice how matters stood. So, also, was Mr. Ralph Formby, and while the latter paid more than usual attention to Ada, Kate was particularly gracious with our hero. About midnight, all the guests adjourned to the supper-room for refreshments, where Jack remained but a few minutes. He was weary, both in mind and body. All the night he had been acting a part he did not feel, and was longing for a few moments of quiet and repose. For this purpose he stole away as soon as he could do so without attracting attention, and made for the conservatory, where he thought he would be able to have a quiet smoke all to himself. Starting at right angles from the main body of the conservatory was the Fernery, an arrangement of rocks and dripping water, and any number of odd corners where one could easily hide if he felt so disposed. Jack knew the place well, and was soon sitting quite alone in the darkness, pulling steadily at his cigar. Now, whether it was that he was too busy with his thoughts, or whether there was no pleasure in smoking when he could not see the smoke, certain it is that he let the cigar go out ere 1/3 of it was consumed, and sat, staring into the darkness, as still and moveless as a block of wood. In the adjoining conservatory he heard for a while the murmur of voices and the trailing of dresses on the floor, but soon all grew quiet again, and still he sat on, indifferent to the flight of time, and unconcerned as to what the other guests might think of his absence. Indeed, so absorbed did he become in his own thoughts that he did not notice that some of the guests had returned again to the conservatory, and were carrying on an animated conversation almost close to the entrance of the Fernery. At length he started, and sat bolt upright, as the mention of his own name fell upon his ears. His first impulse was to rush out of the Fernery, and most likely he would have done so, but that the words that followed the mention of his name had a particular fascination for him, and seemed to hold him spellbound. Moreover, he had already sat within hearing of the conversation for some considerable time, and though he had not heeded a single sentence, it would be difficult to explain how that could be. "I wish I could escape without betraying myself," was his thought, but that was impossible. Moreover, the questions and answers had followed each other so rapidly that even while he debated what to do, he had heard the conversation that was never intended for his ears. "I may as well keep quiet," was his second thought, "and hear the tattle out." So he sat on, in the darkness, with every sense keenly awake now, and yet with an uneasy feeling of guilt, such as he had never before experienced. There were 3 ladies engaged in the conversation, but only one voice did he recognize, and that the voice of Kate Netherby. "There can be no doubt that Jack Formby proposed to her," he heard Kate say, "and it is equally certain that she refused him." "But how did you get to know that?" one of the speakers asked, "for it seems to me that Ada is very reticent on the subject." "Well, you see," Kate answered, "he came over one afternoon when we were all out, and from what Simmons says, he must have sat with her more than an hour. I have known all along that he was fond of her, and more than that she is fond of him." "Then how do you explain her rejecting him?" asked the 2 voices in chorus. "Oh, I will explain that by and by," Kate answered with a little laugh. "But let me tell you first how I got to know he had proposed to her. I happened to return home just as he was leaving, and met him full tilt in the hall. But, bless you, he might have been blind. He passed straight out of the house, without noticing me, and with such a look of hopeless misery on his face as I have never seen. I knew in a moment what had happened, and so rushed straight into the drawing-room, and charged Ada with it, and of course she was not able to deny it.
"At any rate," said one of the speakers, "neither of them seems to be much troubled about the matter. I've never seen them in better spirits than they are tonight."
"Oh, that is largely put on," said Kate gaily. "But I dare say they will get over it. I hope they will, for poor Mr. Ralph will not make much headway while Ada keeps worrying herself about Jack." "Is Mr. Ralph very fond of her?" one of the ladies asked. "Oh, yes, I think he likes her well enough," Kate answered. "I know someone he likes better," with a little laugh, "but that someone is out of his reach, and so he is turning his attention to Ada. She has a nice fortune in her own right, you know, and Ralph is poor, so naturally he's looking out for money." "And are you willing for Ada to sacrifice herself to him?" one of the speakers asked in some surprise. "I think it would be a very good match," Kate answered sharply. "He's well connected and quite a gentleman, besides which he's a noted philanthropist in his own way. He's secretary to the societies for sending tracts to the camps at Cannes, for the evangelization of Borneo, for the fertilization of the Sahara, for the rescue of the street Arabs of Damascus, and for I don't know how many other societies. And all this, you know, is in Ada's line. She greatly admires all philanthropists, and would be very happy, I have no doubt, in helping Ralph in his work. Still, I cannot understand," one of the ladies persisted, "if she is fond of Jack Formby, as you say she is, why she refused him." "Well, the truth is this," Kate answered, and she dropped her voice just a little. "Ada has what I call very heroic notions about life and duty. She thinks that every man in the world, however rich he might be, should do something, should have a mission, you know. And a man who idles his life away is to her almost a heathen. Indeed, she once told me that she would be false to her highest convictions and to the traditions of her family if she were to link her life to a man who, like Jack Formby, just loitered through life in idleness." "Oh, she's in that way of thinking, is she?" interposed one of the ladies. "Oh, that's her precisely," answered Kate. "She has read Ruskin and Carlyle to such an extent that she is just full of the most stupid notions imaginable. At least I think so. Still, you can quite understand her reasons for rejecting Jack Formby, for he is, in this respect at least, her aversion. He takes no interest in anything. Politics, commerce, and religion are all alike to him. I don't think he goes to church 5 times a year on an average. So that you can see clearly that, however fond Ada may be of him, in marrying him she would have to sacrifice every principle she has professed so ardently." "At any rate," said one of the speakers, "I do not think there are many other girls who would fling up so good a chance on such a pretext." "Do you mean that for me?" Kate asked with a laugh. "Oh, dear, no, not at all," was the answer, "though if the cap suits you, you know you can wear it." "Oh, thank you," said Kate, "but it doesn't fit in the least. But don't you think we have been gossiping long enough? I propose we get back to the ballroom at once. "Yes, I think we'd better get back," was the reply, and the next moment the trio moved silently away, much to Jack's comfort, for he was getting cramped and tired with sitting still so long, and felt that if they stayed much longer, he would be compelled to reveal himself. He did not return to the ballroom. He was too excited, too angry with himself and everybody else. Watching his opportunity, he stole quietly out of the house and made his way towards Rycroft with all possible haste. Chapter 9. A New Experience. For several days after the party, Jack remained in a very unenviable state of mind. His faith had been shaken in everybody, and most of all in himself. Kate Netherby, he considered, had revealed an amount of meanness in her treatment of Ada that was most discreditable to her. Nor was he at all certain that Ada had not departed from her own strict code of honour in her treatment of him. Ralph Formby had told what appeared to be a deliberate falsehood in saying that Ada was penniless, while the Netherbys generally were not altogether Janak, to use the Lancashire vernacular, in helping Ralph's suit and opposing his. "I will have it out with Ralph," he said, savagely, on reaching his den on the night of the party. "He will either have to explain his words, or I shall treat him, for the future, as he deserves. Though," he added a moment later, "I suppose eavesdropping will be considered by most people quite as great an offence as fibbing." For the next 3 or 4 days he saw nothing of the Netherbys or of Ada Woodville. In the meanwhile, however, he had plenty of time for reflection, as well as for maturing any plans he might have made. It was about a week after the party when, rambling on the edge of the moors, he came face to face with Ada. She was walking along with listless step and eyes bent upon the ground, so that she did not notice him until he was close upon her. For a moment both felt considerably embarrassed. Each felt that there was an amount of shyness or coldness existing between them that was anything but exhilarating. Jack was the first to recover himself, though it was only by a tremendous effort that he did so. "Look here, Miss Ada," he said, in his blunt, abrupt fashion. "May we be friends, may we not? Of course, it is impossible to forget what has passed between us. Still, that is no reason, surely, why we should not be friends still." "I should be very sorry, indeed, to think that our friendship was at an end," she answered frankly. "Indeed, you will always be a friend to me, whatever may happen." "I am glad to hear you say that," he said with a smile. And he lifted his hat and pushed his fingers through his brown locks. "I had hoped once for something better, but that hope, I suppose, must perish." It was a random shot, and he watched eagerly its effect, but with the exception of a sudden dropping of the eyelids, she betrayed no emotion, nor did she make any answer. "May I walk along with you?" he said, after a somewhat awkward pause. "I should be very glad indeed of your company," she answered, while the faintest flush imaginable mounted to her cheeks. For a few 100 yards they walked in silence, Then Jack suddenly blurted out, as though by a tremendous effort,
"I overheard a bit of gossip the other day, Miss Ada."
"Indeed?" she answered, but without lifting her eyes.
"No matter how or when," he went on, "but as it related particularly to yourself, I cannot help mentioning it, although very likely you will consider me ill-mannered for doing so. But the hope I cherished was so dear to me that it is hard to relinquish it altogether."
"I thought you were going to speak of some piece of gossip you had overheard," she said quietly.
"Yes, that is so," he answered with some little embarrassment. "It was to the effect that if I had only been a useful member of society, instead of being the wastrel that I am, you might not have rejected my offer."
"Excuse me, Mr. Formby," she said quickly. "That is a matter I have never spoken to anyone about, and no one has a right to say what might or might not have been."
"Of course. It was only a surmise," Jack said faintly, feeling that his hope was being dashed again. "But I thought if it contained any shadow of truth at all, I might still hope a little. That is, I might try to become a useful member of society. Try to do something, you know. Try to make myself worthy of you, so that in 3 or 4 or 5 years, supposing you were still free, you might permit me to plead my cause again."
He spoke wildly, almost despairingly. She had never seen him so agitated before, and for several moments she felt unable to reply. She was scarcely less agitated than he, and when she spoke at length her voice was low and tremulous. "I am sure," she said, "that you will feel that your question is a very embarrassing one. And yet, as you have been so frank with me, I think I ought to be equally frank with you. I will not deny, therefore, that I care for you more than for anyone else. I cannot forget that you have always been good to me, that once you saved my life, and as long as I live I shall think of you and care for you. Yet to be candid, I could not link my life to one who is serving no useful purpose in this world, who, shall I say it, who neither serves God nor his followers. With my views of life, such a union would be a blunder in every sense of the word. No, Mr. Formby, I must not deny it. Had your life been different, my answer to you would have been different. Is that sufficient to give you any hope for the future?"
"It is, Miss Ada,"
he said, impulsively seizing her hand and at the same time kissing it.
"If anything will make a man of me, it is the hope of winning your love. I will begin this very day, and if I fail, think kindly of me. I have never loved but you. I shall never love another. God bless you, and may you be happy."
"I am sure no one will grieve more than I shall if you fail," she said with a blush, "and no one will rejoice more if you succeed."
"The work will be difficult," he said, almost sadly, "and the road to success will, I fear, be a long one. And in the meanwhile, someone more worthy may win your love. And what shall I do then?"
"You should be noble," she said, "for its own sake, not for mine. And as for the future, that we must leave in the hands of God. Today and tomorrow, and each day as it comes, we must do what is right. The rest we must leave. We're in God's hands, Mr. Formby, and he will help us, if we do our best."
"I've never thought much of that," he answered with downcast eyes. "I've neglected religion as I have neglected everything else. But from this day, God helping me, I start afresh, and I am not without hope that I shall succeed."
"I am glad you say God helping me," she answered with emotion, "for only by his help shall we conquer, and if you only trust in him, I am sure you will not fail."
"God bless you for your helpful words," he answered. "And now I will leave you. The way lies before me, dark and uncertain, and something tells me the struggle will be hard. But the memory of those dear eyes of yours will ever be as stars of hope to me."
And he paused suddenly, and taking both her hands in his, he looked at her steadily in the face for one brief moment. Then, by a sudden impulse, he drew her to his breast. She offered no resistance, nor did any word pass between them, but their lips met in one pure kiss of love, and in that moment of rapture each knew that for ever and ever they were one heart, though their lives might drift far as the poles asunder. No word was spoken after that, and when at length she lifted her drooping eyelids, Jack was gone. For several seconds she stood, quite still, as though trying to realize what had happened. It seemed so like a dream that she almost wondered if she had not fallen asleep there in the sunshine and dreamed it all. But turning her head in the direction Jack had taken, she saw his stalwart form far down the hillside, and pressing forward with firm and resolute steps. "He is my love," she said, her heart giving a great bound at the same time, "and he will win, for he is brave, and we shall be happy yet." Then, slowly, she wended her way homeward, a strange, sweet thrill in her heart, such as she had never experienced before. She never regretted for a moment what had taken place. He was her lover now, though they might never meet again, and she had confessed her love in a way that he could not fail to understand. She had sent him forth with a great hope in his heart to do and to dare, and in this she felt that she had acted a true woman's part. To redeem a life like his from selfishness and sloth would be an achievement worth living for. And so her heart was full of a sweet content, such as one always feels when he or she has done a true and worthy deed. Little did she dream, or he, that that one kiss would mean such a long farewell. For the events that were so swiftly coming had cast no shadows before, or even if they had, neither had eyes to see them. The noon of that day was the brightest Jack had ever known, but the night that followed was the darkest of his life. And that is where we will end the story for today. Close up the book and leave it aside for next time. Thank you all so much for joining me for this turning point in the story of Real Grit by Silas K. Hocking. I look forward to continuing the story with you all soon and seeing the events that transpire between that kiss and the rest of their lives. See you all soon. Goodbye.